Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're building a BS detector. Seriously, we're going to give you the tools you need to spot those misleading claims about society, psychology, and the economy. And we'll be guided by the experts who study this stuff for a living. Let's get right into it.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll figure out what this pseudoscience trap even is. Then, we'll look at how it pops up in different areas of life. We'll also get real about the actual costs of falling for it. And this is the most important part. We're going to arm you with a toolkit so you can avoid it. You know that feeling, right? You're scrolling and you see a headline or a pundit offering this super simple fix for a huge, complicated problem, and something in your gut just says, wait a minute, that little flicker of doubt, that's what we're digging into today. To really get our bearings, we have to look at the work of Professor Alistair Finch. He makes it so clear that pseudoscience is, at its core, a performance. It's an act. It dresses up in the lab coat of science, uses all the right buzzwords to sound official, but it's missing the one thing that actually matters: real, rigorous scientific evidence. Okay, and this slide really lays it all out. You see, science is all about testing, about evidence, and get this, it's about trying to prove itself wrong. That's how it gets stronger. Pseudoscience, though, it's the complete opposite. It's like a fortress built to protect one single idea. It uses personal stories, it picks and chooses the data that fits, and it hits you right in the emotions. It's not about finding the truth, it's about making you believe. Professor Finch also points out this huge source of confusion that trips people up all the time: the word theory. In our everyday lives, a theory is just a hunch, right? But in science, a theory is the grand prize. It's a powerful explanation backed by a mountain of evidence that's been tested again and again and again. And here is where that trap snaps shut. When someone dismisses something major, like evolution, by saying it's just a theory, they're playing a word game. They're using the everyday meaning, a guess, to attack the scientific meaning, which is this rock-solid body of evidence. It's a classic misinformation tactic. So now that we know the basics of the trap, let's see how it plays out in the real world, specifically in psychology. This is where Professor Thorne's work is so important, because he specializes in unpacking all these myths we believe about our own minds. And wow, Professor Thorne's work shows just how many of these myths are floating around. Ideas like learning styles, that you're either a visual or auditory learner, or the idea of a perfect photographic memory. Why do we love these ideas? Well, because they're simple. They put us in a neat little box. It feels good to have a label. But the actual science shows our brains are way more complex and flexible than that. The same goes for things like the Myers-Briggs personality test. It can be fun, for sure, but it really oversimplifies the beautiful, messy reality of who we are. And this gets really serious when you talk about mental health. You have evidence-based treatments like cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been rigorously tested in hundreds of studies and proven to work. And then you have other approaches that rely on testimonials, vague promises about balancing your energy and personal anecdotes. Professor Thorne's research makes it clear, without proper testing, you can't tell what actually helps from what just sounds nice. Now, these traps aren't just messing with our understanding of ourselves. They're used all the time to shape how we see society and the economy, often twisting numbers and stories to lead us down a very specific path. And here we turn to economist Professor Evelyn Reed. She explains that we are just hardwired to love simple stories, especially when it comes to something as complicated as the economy. These simple narratives feel good, they feel right, but they almost always hide the messy, complicated truth of how things actually work. A perfect example of this: trickle-down economics. The story is fantastic. You give tax cuts to the rich, they invest that money, create jobs, and boom, everyone benefits. It's a great story. But as Professor Reed points out, the real-world data has been, well, mixed, to say the least. Often that money goes into stock buybacks instead of new jobs. It's a classic case of an appealing story being sold as a guaranteed fact, even when the evidence just isn't there. Numbers can be especially tricky because they feel so objective. For example, with crime statistics, one person can use the raw total number of crimes to push one narrative. Another person can use the crime rate per capita to push a completely different narrative. And here's the kicker: both numbers can be technically correct. The pseudoscience stops there, at the number that proves its point. But real, honest inquiry asks the next question: why? Why is there a difference? Is it about poverty, history, systemic issues? That's where the real understanding begins. So you might be thinking, Okay, this is interesting, but does it really matter in my life? Oh, it absolutely does. Believing in these bad ideas has real, tangible costs for our wallets and for our well being. These costs can be anything from wasting money on useless wellness fads to getting caught up in a financial scheme. But our source material had this one incredibly powerful personal story. It's about how a specific ideology, in this case from the manosphere, convinced someone that to be empowered, they had to buy certain things. So let's just break down the real, hard cash costs in this one case. First up, the firearm itself. That's about 500 bucks. But you can't just buy it. You have to learn how to use it safely, so you have to add in the cost of ammo and time at the shooting range. That's another $400 easy. And just like that, you're looking at nearly $1,000, all spent to fulfill a need that was created and sold by a pseudoscientific ideology. But you know what? The biggest costs aren't even on the price tag. The data is very clear. Having a firearm in the home statistically increases the risk of accidents and suicide. And then there's the psychological weight of it all, that feeling of being on constant alert, which can actually destroy the sense of security you were trying to buy. Okay, so we've seen the trap, and we've seen the very real costs. Now for the most important part. How do we escape it? How do we protect ourselves? For that, let's circle back to Professor Finch for some practical tools we can all start using right now. Professor Finch gives us 5 essential mental habits. Number 1, the old Carl Sagan rule. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. If it sounds too good or too crazy to be true, you need to see some serious proof. 2, always ask, what am I not being told? 3, go out and actively look for people who disagree with you. It's the best way to test your own beliefs. 4, look at the source. Who's telling you this and what's in it for them? And finally, number 5, remember that science is always learning. It's a process, not a book of final answers. And you know, it's not just about how you think, it's about what you let into your brain in the first place. Think of it like mental hygiene. Don't get all your info from one place. Don't let the algorithm build you a cozy little echo chamber. And please, learn the difference between a journalist reporting facts and a pundit telling you how to feel about those facts. And sometimes, honestly, the best thing you can do is just unplug for a bit. And one last big one, watch out for loaded language. Words like capitalism or socialism have real, complex definitions, but in political fights, they're often just used as weapons, as emotional buttons to get you riled up. Just knowing what the words actually mean, that's your shield. It protects you from being so easily manipulated. Look, at the end of the day, pseudoscience is tempting. It offers us these simple, clean answers in a world that feels messy and complicated. But the real world is messy and complicated, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Figuring it out takes curiosity, it takes a little healthy skepticism, and it takes a willingness to look for real evidence. So the next time you hear that perfect, simple answer, will you stop and ask a few more questions?